It was a cold night in Chicago. Back in December 1956, the streets were quiet and the winter air was sharp. That evening, two sisters, 15-year-old Barbara Grimes and 12-year-old Patricia Grimes, were heading out for a night of fun. They were huge Elvis Presley fans and had already seen his movie Love Me Tender multiple times. That night, they were going to see it again at the Brighton Theatre in Brighton Park. The theatre was about a mile and a half from their home in the McKinley Park neighborhood. They left around 7:30 p.m., carrying about $2.50 between them, around $29 in today's money. Barbara had been told by their mother, Loretta, to keep 50 cents in her wallet, in case they decided to stay for the second showing. It's unclear how they got to the theatre that night. Did they walk? Or did they take the bus? No one really knows. A school friend of Patricia's, named Dorothy Wynert, later told investigators she'd been sitting right behind the girls at the theatre, along with her younger sister. Around 9:30 p.m. during the intermission, Dorothy left. As she passed by, she saw Barbara and Patricia standing in line for popcorn. They looked happy, relaxed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Barbara and Patricia stayed for the second showing of Love Me Tender, which meant they would likely be home around 11:45 p.m. But when midnight passed and they still hadn't returned, their mother began to worry. She sent two of her older children, 17-year-old Teresa and 14-year-old Joey, to the bus stop to wait for them. 3 buses came and went. No sign of the girls. Loretta tried calling their friends, hoping they had stopped by someone's house, but no one had seen them. At 2:15 a.m. on December 29, she reported her daughters missing to the Chicago Police Department. At first, some officers thought the girls had simply run away or were staying with friends. Despite Loretta's protest, this theory caused delays in the investigation. But after nearly a week with no word from Barbara or Patricia, and after friends and family insisted this was completely out of character, police finally treated the case as a serious disappearance. The search that followed was one of the biggest in Cook County history. By December 29, police had already started canvassing the Brighton Park neighborhood, going door to door, and checking any possible lead. A special task force was created just to find the Grimes sisters. Hundreds of police officers were assigned to the case full-time. With help from nearby towns, local volunteers joined the search, scouring alleys, fields, and waterways. Even canals and rivers were dredged, hoping to uncover any clue. Over 15,000 flyers were handed out across the city. Parishioners from the girls' church offered a $1,000 reward, equal to about $11,600 today, for any information that could help bring them home. As news spread, the Grimes sisters became front-page headlines by December 31. Media appeals ran constantly, begging for witnesses to come forward and for the girls to return home if they were out there. As a result, police received thousands of tips. Between eyewitness statements and reports, over 300,000 people were spoken to. Around 2,000 individuals were questioned more seriously. Many of those interrogations were intense, and not all of them led anywhere. 2 arrests were made, but both cases fell apart. One man, Edward Bedwell, who resembled Elvis Presley, even confessed. However, he later said police had pressured him into saying things that weren't true. After a long, grueling interrogation, some teenagers who had been at the Brighton Theatre the same night as the Grimes sisters came forward, they claimed to have seen the girls talking to a man who resembled Elvis Presley. Several said they saw the sisters get into a car with him. Witnesses were consistent in describing the car as a Mercury model, sleek and shiny, which matched reports of a suspicious vehicle seen nearby. Meanwhile, throughout the first 2 weeks of January, new sightings kept trickling in. Some people claimed to have seen the girls in diners or walking around the city, even as late as January 9. These scattered reports helped keep early theories alive. Had the girls possibly run away? But none of those sightings were ever confirmed. Then, on January 22, 1957, nearly a month after Barbara and Patricia Grimes vanished, the case took a devastating turn. That afternoon, a construction worker named Leonard Prescott was driving along a quiet rural road called German Church Road, just about 200 feet east of County Line Road in Willow Springs. The recent snowfall had started to melt as he passed a guardrail near Devil's Creek. Something strange caught his eye, what he later described as these flesh-colored things lying in the snow. At first, he thought maybe they were discarded mannequins, that the image stuck with him. And not long after, he returned to the spot, this time with his wife, Marie. As the couple approached the scene, Marie took one look and fainted. Well, they weren't mannequins. They were the frozen, lifeless bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. The Prescotts rushed to alert the Willow Springs Police Department. The girls had been left behind the guardrail on a flat patch of snow-covered ground. It stretched just 10 feet before sloping down into the creek embankment. It looked like someone had driven them there, pulled their bodies from a car, and then either gently placed or tossed them over the side. Barbara was lying on her left side, her legs slightly curled toward her torso. Patricia was on her back, her head twisted sharply to the right, her body partly covering Barbara's head. The scene was eerie, almost like they had been arranged. Both girls were naked, and the freezing temperatures had preserved their bodies. Soon after, their father, Joseph Grimes, was brought to the scene to identify them. It was him who confirmed what no parent should ever have to face. These were his daughters. Following that heartbreaking discovery, more than 160 police officers from various suburban departments and volunteers flooded the scene. The forest preserves joined in to help with the search, but despite the effort, little to no physical evidence was recovered. Sadly, the investigation at the site was poorly handled. With so many untrained volunteers and officers walking around, potential evidence may have been trampled or lost forever. The next day, January 23, 1957, autopsies on Barbara and Patricia Grimes were performed. 3 experienced forensic pathologists worked together, spending 5 hours examining the girls' bodies in an attempt to determine what had happened to them. But even after such an extensive examination, they couldn't reach an agreement on the exact cause or time of death. What they did agree on was that both girls had likely died within 5 hours of their last confirmed sighting, at the Brighton Theatre on the night of December 28. Their stomach contents were examined, revealing remnants of the meals and snacks they had eaten that evening. Based on that, the most likely time of death was late on December 28, or in the early hours of December 29, just hours after they were last seen alive. As for the cause of death, the pathologists concluded it was a combination of shock and exposure to the cold, but they couldn't be certain. It seems that other potential causes were ruled out, and this conclusion was reached by eliminating all other possibilities. The autopsy also revealed something strange. Many of the wounds on the girls' bodies seemed to have been caused by rodents, likely from the time their bodies had been left in the cold. The puncture wounds, which looked like they had been made by sharp objects, were believed to have occurred after the girls had died. Following the autopsies, the findings were further analysed. The coroners concluded that the cause of death for both girls was a secondary shock, resulting from exposure to freezing temperatures. Their bodies had been exposed to cold that dropped their body temperature below the level compatible with life. The frigid conditions during the weeks leading up to January 22, 1957, played a crucial role in their deaths. One of the coroners, Walter McCarran, offered an additional theory. He believed the bodies had lain undiscovered for many days before being found. McCarran suggested that the extremely cold temperatures in the weeks prior, along with recent snowfalls, helped preserve the bodies. He reasoned that the bodies had remained undisturbed because a layer of snow had covered the area around January 9, and it wasn't until that snow melted, shortly before January 22, that the bodies were revealed. However, not all of the findings were agreed upon. Harry Glowes, the chief investigator for the Cook County Coroner's Office, strongly disagreed with the official time of death. Glowes believed there were numerous marks of violence on the sisters' faces, which, in his view, strongly indicated that the girls had suffered before they died, not after. He contended the injuries were not the result of post-mortem rodent activity. Additionally, Glowes pointed out the presence of a thin layer of ice that had formed on the bodies. He argued that the ice likely indicated the girls had been alive until at least January 7, as only after that date could the combination of snow and their body heat have caused ice to form. Glowes believed this proved the girls had been alive much later than originally thought, and had likely been deposited by the roadside while they were still alive. Another shocking discovery emerged during the investigation. Glowes stated that both girls had likely been subjected to sexual assaults during their period of captivity. Patricia's autopsy revealed traces of semen in her vaginal fluid. Moreover, curdled milk was found in Barbara's stomach, an unsettling detail. since it was unclear where she could have consumed milk that night, at home or at the theatre. In the aftermath of the discovery, the investigation turned its focus to several suspects, including Edward Bedwell. Bedwell, a 21-year-old drifter from Tennessee, had been living a transient lifestyle in Chicago. He was known to resemble Elvis Presley, which sparked interest in his connection to the case. On January 24, 1957, the owners of a restaurant where Bedwell worked claimed that he and another man were there with two girls who looked like the Grimes sisters. In the early morning of December 30, Bedwell was arrested and interrogated for 3 days. He initially denied the girls were the Grimes sisters, but later signed a 14-page confession on January 27, 1957. In it, he stated that he and his acquaintance, William Cole Willingham, had been with the girls from December 30 until January 7, drinking in various West Madison Street Skid Row bars. He claimed that after feeding the girls hot dogs, he and Willingham had beaten both sisters extensively before throwing their nude bodies into a snow-filled ditch after the girls refused their sexual advances. However, Bedwell later recanted his confession. He said he had only signed it after being held in custody for 4 days, believing the police would release him if he confessed. The autopsy report supported Bedwell's recantation. There was no evidence of alcohol or hot dogs in the girls' digestive systems, and neither girl had been beaten to death. Further investigation revealed Bedwell had been clocked in at Ajax Consolidated Company from 4:19 p.m. on December 28 to 12:30 a.m. On December 29, covering the most likely time frame of the sisters' abduction, records also confirmed that Bedwell had been working in Cicero on the day he claimed to have murdered the girls, on February 6, 1957. Bedwell was released on a $20,000 bond, approximately $224,500 in today's money. The bond was paid by a benefactor from Champaign. Despite his acquittal, Bedwell's criminal history didn't end there. That same year, he was tried and acquitted for the 1956 rape of a 13-year-old girl in Oak Hill, Florida. In addition to Edward Bedwell, 2 other individuals became suspects in the case: Max Flagg and Walter Krantz. Max Flagg, a young man in his teens at the time, was another suspect who gained attention. Flagg had admitted to the murders during a polygraph test, but he was released due to Illinois law prohibiting the use of polygraph evidence on juveniles. Despite his release, Flagg later committed another crime, murdering a young woman, and was imprisoned for it. Some investigators believed Flagg was involved in the Grimes sisters' case, but there was insufficient evidence to link him directly to the crime. Walter Krantz, a 53-year-old steam-fatter and self-proclaimed psychic, entered the case in an unusual manner. On January 15, 1957, Krantz phoned a switchboard operator at Chicago's Central Police Complaint Room, claiming to have had a vision revealing that both sisters were deceased and that their bodies could be found in an unincorporated area of Lyons Township. Krantz refused to give his name, stating that he had experienced this vision after a night of heavy drinking, and ended the call abruptly. The operator, however, was able to trace the call to a location near Krantz's home. The park Krantz described in his phone call would turn out to be approximately 1 mile from where the girls' bodies would be found, just 1 week later. When questioned by police, Krantz explained that several of his family members and ancestors had possessed psychic abilities, and he believed the vision was a result of his own psychic powers. Despite his seemingly eerie prediction, Krantz was initially considered the #1 suspect in the case. Handwriting experts even suggested that Krantz may have been the author of a ransom note received by the Grimes family before the bodies were discovered. However, Krantz denied any involvement in the sisters' abduction and murder, and after being subjected to multiple interrogations, he was released. The investigation into the deaths of Barbara and Patricia Grimes took another controversial turn in February 1957. Harry Glowes, the chief investigator for the Cook County Coroner's Office, became a vocal advocate for a particular suspect in the case, Edward Bedwell. Glowes was convinced that Bedwell had been the one to murder the sisters. He believed the wound marks found on the girls' bodies had not been adequately investigated or considered. In Glowes' view, the beating and assault marks indicated the girls had been physically attacked before their murder. Glowes also pointed to the evidence of sexual activity found in the autopsies as aligning with the details provided by Bedwell during his January 1957 interrogations. These marks, along with the semen found in Patricia's body and the curdled milk in Barbara's stomach, painted a grim picture of the sisters' final hours. Glowes insisted these details were critical to the case, yet he believed the authorities were withholding them to protect the girls' reputations and spare their mother's feelings. On February 15, the controversy came to a head when coroner Walter E. McCarran fired Glowes for refusing to retract his statements. Glowes argued that his firing was politically motivated and insisted he had simply been trying to reveal the truth about what had happened to the sisters. However, despite the dismissal, Glowes' involvement with the case did not end there. Sheriff Joseph D. Lohman, who also believed the girls had been lured into a vehicle under false pretenses and tortured by a sexual predator, deputized Glowes to continue working on the case, though without pay. Glowes remained committed to his belief that the girls had been victims of brutal violence and that Bedwell was responsible for their deaths. Later in his life, Glowes became a career law enforcement officer and served as the Northlake police chief. Until his death, he maintained his conviction about the case and continued to advocate for justice for the Grimes sisters. In the weeks following the disappearance of Barbara and Patricia Grimes, several unconfirmed sightings of the sisters were reported, both within Chicago and outside the city. These sightings were carefully investigated, but none led to any definitive answers, further deepening the mystery of their disappearance. The most widely reported sightings included the following. Several individuals reported seeing the girls boarding a Chicago Transit Authority bus on Archer Avenue after their visit to the Brighton Theatre on the evening of December 28, 1956. The bus driver himself was among those who came forward. According to the reports, the girls were seen heading east into the city, and it was said that they got off the bus at Western Avenue, approximately halfway between the theatre and their home, at around 11:05 p.m. The reason the sisters would have exited the bus at Western Avenue remains a mystery, and it is unclear why they didn't continue directly home. Another key witness was Roger Menard, who also attended the Love Me Tender screening on December 28. Menard sat behind the girls and their friend Dorothy Wynett. He reported leaving the theatre just a minute before the sisters and walking down Archer Avenue. As he walked, he noticed the girls were following him, but then a late model green Buick stopped beside them. According to Menard, the girls hesitated briefly before continuing to walk. Shortly after, a black 1949 Mercury containing two teenage boys pulled up alongside them near 42nd Street, and the girls simply giggled before continuing their walk. Ed Lorden and Earl Zastro, two teenage boys, also reported seeing the Grimes sisters that night. Around 11:30 p.m. on December 28, as they were driving through McKinley Park, they noticed the girls near 35th Street, close to Seeley and Damon Avenues. The girls appeared to be giggling and jumping out of doorways at each other, and the boys recognized them as the Grimes sisters. At this point, the sisters were about 2 blocks from their home. On December 29, a security guard named Jack Franklin came forward with his own sighting. Franklin claimed that at approximately 12:30 p.m., he had encountered 2 girls near Lawrence and Central Park Avenues about 12 hours after they had left the theatre. He had offered them directions, and although he initially wasn't sure if they were the Grimes sisters, he later remembered the encounter. Franklin described the girls as being rude and abrupt with him, which made the exchange stand out in his memory. Judy Burrow, a friend of Barbara, also reported seeing the sisters that same afternoon. According to Burrow, she saw the girls walking westward on Archer Avenue, just 2 blocks from Diamond Avenue, at approximately 2:30 p.m. on December 29. Despite these numerous sightings, none of the reports were able to provide any concrete evidence or led investigators to the girls' whereabouts. Each of these sightings raised more questions than answers, and their validity remained uncertain as the investigation continued. In the midst of the investigation into the Grimes sisters' disappearance, other suspects and theories emerged. However, none led to conclusive evidence or arrests. The case of the Grimes sisters remains one of Chicago's most heartbreaking unsolved mysteries. with numerous theories, suspects, and potential leads over the years. Investigation continues to intrigue both those involved and the public, highlighting the tragic loss and the ongoing pursuit of justice. Did you know that in similar unsolved cases, advancements in forensic science, like DNA analysis, have led to breakthroughs decades later? It makes us wonder, could new technology ever bring closure to the Grimes sisters' case? In 2013, James Grimes, the sisters' younger brother, who had been just 11 years old when his sisters were murdered, stated that he welcomed what he saw as a public reopening of the case. He said, "I just assumed it was never going to be solved, but maybe there's hope." In 2013, Raymond Johnson, a retired West Chicago police officer, began a personal investigation into the case. Johnson, an expert on the case, had become interested in the Grimes sisters case back in 2010 while researching a book about the city's history. After extensively studying the case, Johnson became convinced that it could still be solved, especially with public assistance. He believed that the perpetrator of the crime was Charles Leroy Melquist, a 23-year-old self-confessed child killer who had been a suspect in the Grimes sisters' abduction and murder in 1957. Melquist had been convicted of the 1958 murder of 15-year-old Bonnie Lee Scott, whose decapitated body was discovered less than 10 miles from where the Grimes sisters' bodies were found. Investigators had noted striking similarities in the murder methods and body disposal between the two cases. Despite these similarities, Melquist was never questioned about his potential involvement in the Grimes sisters' deaths, as his attorney had prohibited any interrogation on the matter. The day after Bonnie Lee Scott's body was discovered, Loretta Grimes received a phone call. The caller claimed responsibility for Scott's murder, saying, "I've committed another perfect crime. This is another one those cops won't solve, and they're not going to pin it on Bedwell or Barry Cook." Loretta Grimes later stated that she believed this caller to be the same individual who had contacted her in May 1957, revealing a detail about her daughter's feet that had never been publicly released. She later said, "I will never forget that voice." Charles Melquist was never charged in connection with the Grimes sisters' murders, and he passed away in 2010. The case of the Grimes sisters remains a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of mystery. Despite the passage of time, it continues to captivate the public imagination, inspiring both sorrow and determination for justice.